because it was a thriller last night. As a Bucs fan, I hated it, thought it was terrible, thought it was the worst game ever. No, I'm kidding. But congrats to the Cowboys. Obviously, it was very entertaining down to the very end. Because the Cowboys won, let's take a look at their top 5 graded players first. For Dallas, number 1 on the list is wide receiver CeeDee Lamb. He is who everything runs through, and there's no shock there at a 79.4 overall grade. Linebacker Maris Liufau, somebody who, just want to say, I was a big fan of in last year's draft, really showing up. He's number 2 on this list, 78.2. Edge rusher Micah Parsons, surprise, in this top 5, 74.1. Cornerback Jordan Lewis, a couple of huge plays in this game, which we'll break down a little bit, 72.2. And then number 5 to round it out, the other corner, DaRon Bland, a 69.0. Cooper Rush in this game, a 71.8 overall grade. And then on Tampa's side of things, Vita Vea at the very top of the list with a 71.6. Rookie wide receiver Jalen McMillan, a 71.0. Center Graham Barton, 70.6. Defensive tackle Kalijah Cansey, a 69.0. And then linebacker J.J. Russell with a 68.6. Baker Mayfield in this game, a 70.2. Dalton, what was your stat that told the story as we begin to break down Sunday Night Football?
I think we've got a similar thing here, both of us, and it's something we've talked about for a while this season. Look, if the Bucs are going to make the postseason, Baker Mayfield and their offense is going to be the reason. And if they miss the postseason, it's going to be because of their coverage unit, right? Their back 7 has struggled for a long time. They struggled again in this game, especially in the first half. 6 times this year, they've had a coverage grade under 55, including this game. They are 1-5 in those 6 games, and the one win was the overtime win over Carolina. 50 coverage grade as a team since week 5. That's the 4th lowest in football. Between poor performance and injuries and just Todd Bowles not being able to get into some of the more complicated schemes he wants to get to, Cooper Rush was really able to tear him apart in the first half. And this secondary, there's weeks where they give up way too many yards, way too many points. Another thing, since week 5, they've given up the most passing yards in the league. They get in these shootouts, and the problem is they can't get any stops when they get into them. We've seen it both Atlanta games. This game, there's just been too many times where they can't get stops, especially in the passing game when they need to, and it hurt them again in this game.
Yeah, it's, missing your 2 starting safeties doesn't help, right? Antoine Winfield Jr., Jordan Whitehead, they're out of this game. The regularly scheduled corners were still out there. You had Jamel Dean, you had Zion McCollum, you had Tyke Smith, Christian Izien, who was a nice slot player for them last year. He's sort of that slot safety hybrid, so he was playing a lot of safety in this game. But man, it hasn't looked good for the Bucs. And whether it's been their corners and some of the injuries that they've faced, a couple of those guys in and out of the lineup throughout the season, or the linebackers, roping the linebackers into it as well. I feel like the linebackers really, outside of Levante David, have struggled the entire season in coverage, but even Levante David really struggled last night. And so anytime that's the case, you combine that with their secondary woes, and it's just not going to look pretty. And it's what it was. The defense just did not look pretty once again for this team. And, I think it kind of comes down to Zion McCollum started the year really hot for this team. You thought he could have been maybe a CB1 type, but as he's cooled down a little bit, okay, Jamel Dean, he's more of that CB1, at least in terms of role and duties that he has. In my opinion, Jamel Dean's not really a CB1 type in the league. He's not really nice CB2, but because you're elevating him to a CB1 spot, well, then it's sort of a trickle-down effect of everybody else of kind of where he is starting things and who he has to cover. And like I said, when you're down Jordan Whitehead and Antoine Winfield Jr., it's just going to make it really tough. So the Bucs coverage was an issue in this game. 49.5 coverage grade versus the Cowboys, 0.370 EPA per pass in the first half. It really just come out of the gate, the first half of this game, for the coverage to be as poor as it was. It's been tough. It's been very up and down, and it's opened up the door for questions of, hey, is Todd Bowles as the head coach, given even the success that he has had for them winning the division and getting into the playoffs, like, is that worth maybe letting Liam Cohen walk out of the door to go be a head coach of another team? And I think that some of the defensive struggles for the Buccaneers at least bring up a lot of interesting questions or discussions that they're going to have over the next month, whether or not even they win the division and can make the playoffs. Who is your most impressive before we get to most disappointing?
Honestly, it was kind of tough to pick just one, but I think other than the turnover-worthy play late in the fourth quarter that really could have hurt him, the ball he threw right in J.J. Russell's chest, I thought Cooper Rush was really good in this game. I know he had a 70.7 passing grade, which sounds kind of average, but if I take out that one play, that rises by 8 points. And I think a big thing for me is he's starting to work downfield the last couple weeks. A 90 passing grade on 10-plus yard throws. Over the last 3 weeks, that's a 93. That's second best in the NFL. He's starting to just get comfortable, right? He's had enough starts now since Dak Prescott got hurt, and he had to come in, starting to work downfield to CeeDee Lamb and Kevontae Turpin, even Jalen Tolbert. I think we've seen the Cowboys have some speed to work with on offense, and they're starting to use that speed in that set of guys. Yeah, they might be small, but I think he's comfortable in the pocket. He's making the right reads. He's getting throws off downfield, and I think it's really kind of given some balance in this downfield passing attack. The last couple weeks we've talked about Rico Dowdle in the run game getting a lot better. In this game, not so much. The Bucs are pretty good at stopping the run. Obviously, Vita Vea, Kalijah Canty, Levante David on the inside stopping the run have been pretty good. So Rush had to throw downfield in this game, and he made it happen. I was impressed with the way he played, honestly, outside of that one throw at the very end.
Yeah, Rico Dowdle struggled in this game. I mean, the Cowboys' just rush game in general struggled. 1.8 yards per carry average for Dowdle, who going into this game had the most rushing yards in the league over the last 3 weeks by a wide margin, by almost 100 yards. Kyren Williams was second next to him. But Dowdle's been fantastic, and with the run game not playing well, Cooper Rush was able to play well. So I do think there's a good shout-out. My most impressive is Vita Vea, and not just Bucs bias here. I have to do it literally just for one play, right? We mentioned that Vita Vea earned a 71.6 overall grade. He had a 77.0 coverage grade, which is normally not really something to note for a defensive tackle / nose tackle. But for Vita Vea, it is, because in the game's most crucial moment, or one of them, I should say, coming down to the wire, it's 3rd and 6, right above the 2-minute warning. And this team, no, I actually think it was right at the 2-minute warning, because the 2-minute warning went off, and then the Bucs still had the timeout because they didn't call it beforehand, which sort of a conversation that we don't need to go down that rabbit hole, because I'm gonna talk for an hour if we end up doing that. But anyways, Vita Vea is lined up as the left defensive end, and not just the left defensive end. He is in a stand-up 2-point stance over the right tackle of the Dallas Cowboys. The ball is snapped, and everyone to his right ends up slanting and blitzing the quarterback. And then Vita Vea immediately not only drops back, but drops to almost like a middle linebacker spot. It's a quick pass to the left side of the line of scrimmage. So he continues to move his giant ass all the way towards where the ball is, goes like a heat-seeking missile, and blasts the ball carrier to stop things on 3rd down, make the Cowboys punt, and give the Buccaneers a chance to potentially go down the field and win the game. We know they didn't do that, but an unbelievable showcase of athleticism for Vita Vea, who continues to marvel, it feels like, any week that he is out there on the field. But that play, to go from being a left defensive end in a 2-point stance to go all the way across the field to make that solo stop and hit that ball carrier the way that he did, where the ball almost popped out. I mean, that was just an unbelievable play by a defensive tackle that I had to shout out there. Most disappointing for me, before we get to your most disappointing, just the Bucs ball security and the hands I just have of these players, right? Think of, obviously, the Rachaad White fumbling the football to end the game, kind of like an anticlimactic play where it felt like Baker Mayfield was really on a roll, could have got him in a field goal range. Obviously, you're pumped about that if you're a Cowboys fan, and it was an incredible play to make a play on the ball and rip it loose and win that football game. So I don't want to take anything away from them there, but fumbling the football the way that Rachaad White did was disappointing. And then you go to the previous drive where, or actually it was 2 drives before that, excuse me, because they had scored on the previous drive, where Baker Mayfield hits Jalen McMillan for a bomb of what looks like a touchdown, and Jordan Lewis just ripped it straight out of his hands for an interception. I mean, that is something where, hey, if you get 2 hands on that football and you secure that, obviously we're probably talking about a different result for this football game. And so those 2 plays in particular, I think, killed this team, especially with where they happened with the third to last drive and then the very last drive that they had. So those ball security issues were the most disappointing for a team that looked like they were on a roll there in the second half to overcome what was a bad defense. But who's your most disappointing in this?
It's a guy you mentioned at the top, and actually Levante David. And I know he's a guy that we praise all the time, and we both believe eventually he should be a Hall of Famer. But tough time to have your lowest graded game of the season, 44.4. And I think especially in coverage, 9 catches allowed, 77 yards, 44.2 coverage grade. It just all night, whether it was short passes or the Jalen Tolbert touchdown up the seam or screens, for some reason he just looked a half step late consistently. He was just a little bit late, and it just hurt him in coverage. And there was a few big plays. I can even think of the Jake Ferguson long reception that came on a short pass that David was a little bit late on right before the half that cost the Bucs a field goal. The Cowboys got 3 points out of it. So I think he just had his toughest night of the season in coverage, and it really just kind of exemplifies on the back 7. You know you had a tough night in coverage when Levante David had a tough night in coverage, because he's rarely had those in his career.
Thanks for watching, everybody. Make sure you like and subscribe the video. And if you don't have a PFF Plus subscription, you can get one to see all the premium stats that we talked about here on the show, plus the expert betting and fantasy advice over at subscribe.pff.com. The description is also right below, so if you are not a PFF Plus subscriber, you can become one today.